The President of the United States has said repeatedly that he makes job creation his top priority. He wakes up every morning thinking about what he can do to create jobs, how he can create jobs. And yet we have the greatest shovel-ready project in the country right in front of us. And when it comes to that particular project, for some reason the President is suddenly not interested. Well, I think we have to ask the question is why that is. I think there are probably a number of reasons, most of which have to do with politics and not the economy and not jobs, because clearly this is a subject on which there is no debate when it comes to the job creation potential there, the impact that it would have on the economies of multiple states in our country, what it would do to deal with the issue of energy security. And the project to which I'm referring, Mr. President, is the Keystone XL pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline is a project that has been under review now for the better part of 3 years. In fact, there have been 2 environmental studies. If you look at all the due diligence that's been done, it's clearly been reviewed, it has been analyzed, it has been studied, it has been scrutinized, and it's gotten to the point now where it's time to move forward, time to make a decision on this. And ironically, and I think sort of surprisingly to a lot of people here recently, the administration said that they're not going to decide this now for 18 months. They're going to put it off for 18 months. Interestingly enough, from a timing standpoint, until after the next election. Well, I think it's unfortunate that that's the case because, if your number one priority is job creation, you have one here ready to go today that could be under construction and that would immediately create 20,000 jobs in this country. It would create $7 billion of investment and lots of revenue for state and local governments, many of which desperately need that. And I think of my own state of South Dakota. The Keystone XL pipeline would traverse my state of South Dakota as the oil sands, the oil that comes from the oil sands area up in Canada makes its way down to the refineries in other parts of the country. It comes through South Dakota, and just in our state alone, it would be about $500 million of economic activity. It would mean hundreds of jobs, and as I said before, revenue for lots of state and local governments. This project in my state, like so many states where it comes through where it impacts, there have been a number of opportunities for people to be heard, to get their input made on this. It's been, as I said, going on now for 3 years. And so you finally get to a point where you have to say it is time to make a decision one way or the other. Now, clearly, my view on this is that this is a project that should move forward. But one way or the other, the President of the United States and his administration ought to be acting with some finality on this subject now, not waiting 18 months, not waiting till after the next election because it's politically expedient to do that, but making a decision now. Why is that? Because if it doesn't get done here, that oil from the oil sands area in Canada will go somewhere else, and some other country around the world will benefit from that. It won't be the United States. It won't be refineries here in this country. It won't be the citizens of America who have a good relationship with our neighbor to the north. Canada is our biggest single trading partner. We do about $640 billion of bilateral trade every single year with Canada. It makes a lot of sense if you're thinking about energy security, if you're worried about the dangerous dependence that we have on other countries around the world for our energy needs, that if we're going to get energy, we get it from a country with whom we have a good relationship, a country that is friendly, and country that we do already a tremendous amount of trade with. And so if we don't move forward with this, it is going somewhere, probably to Asia, probably to China. And China will get the benefit, and the citizens of China will get the benefit of this project, rather than having the American people benefit from all that this project would entail if we could get it approved here. But we ought to at least make a decision. We've got all these things all these discussion in this country, all the rhetoric coming from the other side about how it's so important that we create jobs in this country, and yet the administration seems willing to just disregard that and say we are going to make what is clearly a political decision and put this off for 18 months until after the next election. Well, I think it's interesting to note what some are saying about this, and frankly, even what the President himself has said as recently as last April about the importance of getting energy from countries that are stable and friendly. And I want to quote, this is something the President said. Importing oil from countries that are stable and friendly is a good thing. That is something the President of the United States said as recently as last April. There is a letter that went from 22 congressional Democrats to the President telling him that America needs the Keystone XL pipeline. 22 Democrat members of the House of Representatives weighed in on this issue. We've had Democrat senators here as well that have weighed in with the administration and weighed in publicly and said this is an important project. This is a project that needs to be completed. Well, you even have the labor unions, which traditionally you would think of as part of the President's political base. And what are they saying about this? The AFL-CIO said, for America's skilled craft construction professionals, any discussion of the Keystone XL project begins and ends with the word jobs. That's what the AFL-CIO is saying. The Labor's International Union of North America says not just a pipeline, but it is a lifeline for thousands of desperate working men and women. So you have bipartisan support here in Congress. You have the working people, the organizations in these countries who represent working people weighing in, saying this is a project that needs to be approved that would create jobs, that would address some of the economic angst that we're feeling in this country. And here we are faced with this unnecessary delay. Well, we have a piece of legislation, Mr. President, that has 40 co-sponsors here in the United States Senate. It was introduced last week, and many of our colleagues have taken the lead. Senator Hoeven from North Dakota, Senator Johans from Nebraska has been very involved with this, Senator Murkowski, Senator Barrasso, who's here on the floor, and others who believe so strongly in the issue of economic growth, job creation, energy security, national security, that we have introduced a bill that would allow this project either one to move forward or to have the President provide a rationale for why it won't move forward. Pretty simple, straightforward legislation. 60 days, it would allow 60 days, I think, from enactment of the legislation for a decision to be made about the permit, one way or the other. Either it gets permitted or, on the contrary, the President gives an explanation as to why it shouldn't be permitted. But at least we get a decision made so there's some economic certainty for the people behind this project, the people who are making this investment, about whether or not it's going to go forward. The one thing we hear over and over from small businesses across this country, large businesses, job creators, is we need economic certainty. We can't continue to operate in this complete cloud of economic uncertainty if we're going to put investment out there and create the jobs that go with that investment. Well, 700,000 barrels a day is the equivalent of what we get daily from Venezuela. So we could get 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada, a friendly neighbor to the north, or 700,000 barrels a day from Venezuela or any of the other countries around the world from which we import oil. And it just seems so logical and just such a no-brainer for us to be able to trade and to interact and to have this economic relationship with Canada on this particular project. And it does come across, as I said, many parts of the Dakotas and Montana. It will encourage greater oil production, frankly, here in this country as well, because you've got the Bakken Reserve in North Dakota and Montana, which would be able to access, we hope at some point, this pipeline to get some of their energy to refineries around this country. It is an all-of-the-above energy strategy, domestic energy strategy, more domestic oil, more alternative fuels, more innovation. It's all these things that we need when we talk about energy security, but clearly in this case, for some just unexplained reason, the administration has concluded that this project shouldn't go forward. Well, there was a concern raised earlier on about the state of Nebraska and the route that the pipeline was taking. That issue has been addressed. The leaders in Nebraska, Senator Johans, the governor of Nebraska, have come together behind an alternative route, which I believe was agreeable to the company, to TransCanada. And so you can no longer hide behind that and use that as a shield. And the legislation that we introduced would make, of course, this subject to states' rights, and having states like Nebraska intervene and work with the company to find this alternative route. It also would ensure and require strong environmental protections in the legislation. And so that issue is something that the legislation is addressed. But more than anything else, Mr. President, is what it does is it at least forces some action. It at least says, we are going to be serious about job creation in this country, or we're not. We are going to support a shovel-ready project that could create 20,000 jobs and start immediately, or we're not. And so all this rhetoric and all the hot air that comes from people here in Washington, D.C. about wanting to create jobs, this is really putting it to the test. This is where you have to put up or shut up when it comes to whether or not you are serious about creating jobs in this country. And so I hope that my colleagues here in the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, because I believe this is a bipartisan issue, will work with us to advance this legislation. There is some thinking that perhaps the House of Representatives, the other body, may include it in some legislation that they send us that could be coming this way in the not-too-distant future. If that is the case, I hope that we will pick that up and act on it, because if we are serious and if we mean what we say about job creation in this country, there is no better way than to put some certainty behind this project. And again, it would be one thing if this hadn't been studied and overstudied and evaluated and analyzed and scrutinized, but it has, over and over again now for the better part of 3 years. 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada and the U.S. Bakken region up in North Dakota to U.S. refineries, or 700,000 barrels of oil headed to some other place around the world that will benefit from it. And just as importantly, if not more importantly, 700,000 barrels of oil that the United States will have to import from some other country around the world that perhaps isn't nearly as friendly as our neighbors to the north. Said, this isn't complicated. This is a pretty straightforward issue, and one where I don't think there's anything but support from the states that are impacted by this, anything but support from the leadership, the political leadership at the state level and local levels. And clearly, I mean, I'm not suggesting that there's no project that has unanimous support, and there are people who oppose this as there are people who oppose almost anything that happens in this country. But the huge majority of people, I think, in the states who are impacted by this see this as for what it is, a positive, forward-looking project that would address so many of the important priorities for this country right now: economic growth, job creation, energy security, national security, addressing some of the needs that state and local governments have for additional revenue. All these issues are addressed with regard to this project, and it is mystifying, absolutely mystifying, as to why the President of the United States and his administration would put this decision off until 18 months from now, after the next election, other than purely and simply political reasons and motivations. That is wrong for the American people. It's wrong for this project. It's wrong for jobs. It's wrong for our economy. And I hope that this body, the United States Senate, will take steps to rectify that by putting a date certain out there by which this project is at least acted on, at least decided, at least permitted or not permitted, hopefully permitted, so that these jobs can be created and we can get this economic activity underway in these many states. Mr. President, I yield the floor.